Hello, everyone, and good evening, and welcome to tonight's lecture, which is on leadership and the organisation for your assignment on Qualified Level 4 Diploma in Business Management. My name is Professor Maria Mazovet, and I'll be with you for the next 2 hours or so. Okay, so this is your assignment question. I'm not going to read it all out, but I do, if you haven't seen it before, sorry. If you haven't seen it before, hold on, let me get rid of this bit here. I can't see what I'm doing. Okay, so it's a scenario-based question. So you need to use your own employment context to write this assignment. And you need to consider that you're working as a team leader of a small, medium-sized organization, which deals with customers all over the world to sell its products and services. So you are leading a team of 10 individuals within your company who are interacting with customers individually or in a group in their day-to-day roles and responsibilities to achieve the sales target. So in that role, you will obviously be using leadership abilities, skills, and capabilities, and they will contribute to the effectiveness and success of the organization goals. So your assignment includes 3 different tasks to demonstrate the leadership qualities and skills. So the first part, which is task 1, 450 words, asks you to identify different skills and characteristics of successful leaders in your organization and assess how they influence the organization with their leadership style. So I've just put a little quote in here from Elon Musk to get you thinking. So he's a very famous CEO of one of the richest man in the world now he is. So he said this at some point. Other advice I would give is to not blindly follow trends. Question and challenge the status quo. Make sure you understand the fundamental principles of what you're trying to do before you get it into the details. Otherwise, you could be building on faulty ground. So he's saying that you shouldn't just do what everybody else is doing. You should always challenge. You should do what you think is right to do. So this is your assessment criteria. So you need to make sure that these are being touched upon in your essays so that you get the marks. So 1.1 says that you need to identify the different skills and characteristics of successful leaders. And then 1.2 says you need to assess how different leadership styles can influence an organization. So just a little bit here about leaders and leadership. So Andrew Carnegie, who was a famous American philanthropist, he said, "No man will make a great leader who wants to do it all himself or to get all the credit for doing it." Maya Angelou, she's a very famous American writer. She wrote a very famous story about her life, and she's quite famous for her quotes. So she says over her life that she's learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So I want you to be thinking about those quotes in relation to being a great leader, a leadership role in your organization. So here I've just put together some words that I think come to my head when I think about leadership. I'm just going to give you a minute or two to have a quick read through and think about some of those words in relation to leadership. Okay. So now I have a short video to show you on what leadership means to you. And it's been made by the London Business Forum.
Being leadership involves learning what works for the people you're leading.
Looking at the person and understanding the person's point of view, and then editing your behaviour while you treat your values.
And that with your joint vision is very important.
Being very clear about what the outcome is, but actually quite relaxed about the journey to get there. The ability to be an example.
To inspire those around you, instilling confidence, enabling the conditions under which everyone that you're working with thrives. to generate an environment that people want to be part of?
Leadership today means orchestration, organizing talent around you, knowing yourself well enough to know your own weaknesses, and thereby being able to manage those weaknesses, recruit people to complement those weaknesses, and above all, seeing leadership.
Okay, so just some ideas there about how a leader should be and what it means to those people. So that brings us on to, is leadership important in an organization? So on the yes side of things, Child 1972 says, CEOs affect structure, strategy, and culture. Bernard in 1938 says that a collective purpose binds organizational members. So he's saying that a leader is very important because it binds everybody in the organization together. Pfeffer in 1998 says that CEOs make decisions about management practices that affect the organization's performance. And even though CEOs are somewhat interchangeable because of common backgrounds. So he says it doesn't matter who the CEO is particularly, but they make decisions about management practices that can affect the organization's performance. So that's what makes them important. So in the no camp, we have Lawrence and Lorsch in 1967 saying that CEOs are constrained by their environments. So that means they're not necessarily carrying out the things that they want to be doing within an organization, and that the environment around them is stopping them from doing that. And then sometimes CEOs can operate and contribute in different environments. So sometimes they are constrained and sometimes they aren't. So you might want to take a note of some of these articles here, and then you can look them up separately. I'll give you 1 minute to have a look through here. If you just take a note of the name and the year. Okay, I'm going to move on now. You can ask me at the end if you want me to go back to anything. So what's the evidence for this? Question is not whether leadership is important, but instead how much does it contribute? So Lieberson and O'Connor in 1972 said that CEOs make 14.5% variance in profits versus 28.5% in industry effects. So that is on the side of them not being so important. So when and where is it important? So Wasserman and Noraya in 2010, when discussing industry and environment, showed that when opportunities were scarce and there was low growth rates, that's when the CEO had the larger effects. And so that's because the CEOs are taking advantage of every possible opportunity. Google found that higher turnover when engineers and computer scientists in particular had ineffective managers. So that's saying that on the organizational level, if the managers are ineffective, employees are less likely to want to stay within the company and they'll move out of the company. So that means that Garvin 2013, he's saying that managers are very important for organizational level. So more recent evidence on CEO effects. Quigley and Hambrook in 2015 said that more sophisticated statistics controlling for other effects and equalizing differences across time. But the variability in company performance make it ripe for research on upper echelon American society, including the media, boards, and other stakeholders. They have succumbed to the romance of leadership. So the bottom line here is that, yes, CEO actions are important, but sometimes they're more important than other times. So what do CEOs do with their days? Well, 25% of their work is spent on people and relationships, 25% on functional and business unit reviews, only 3% on professional development, and 1% on crisis management. But CEOs value face time. This is the most important part here. 61% of their communication was face-to-face, while only 24% was electronic and 15% by phone and letter. So that means that CEOs really are communicating by face and not by any other means. Perhaps that's something to think about when you're thinking about, are leaders being effective or ineffective? Is there evidence that leadership is changing? Well, this man in the Stanford Negotiation Advisor, he says they don't say anything nowadays that could upset anyone. It's also terribly dull and boring. So I want you to have a think. What are our own implicit views of what leaders do and how they should lead changing? And what about what we believe we should do as leaders? I just want you to jot down a few ideas, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes to do that. I hope that the picture that I've put on there of the 3 men wearing cardigans gave you some idea of what I want you to be thinking about when we say that leadership is changing. So hopefully nowadays in 2022, we would hope to see some women in that picture. Hopefully not wearing brown cardigans though. So this is the world's most powerful women in 2019. Hopefully you recognize some of them. I'm not going to go through every single name. But Angela Merkel, she was very famous as the German Chancellor, and she recently gave up her position. And Christine Lagarde, she is the head of the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. She's French. And you may recognize some of the other women. These are very powerful leaders. You may want to look some of them up and see how they became so successful and maybe what their traits are to make them so successful as leaders. So this is a graph just quickly to show age differences and gender endorsements of agentic leadership. As you can see, the orange column on each of the bars is considerably lower than the men's. So although it is changing, it's still not where we need it to be. So characteristics and actions of leaders. How can we best describe leaders? So we looked at the video at the beginning and those people had lots of ideas about what makes a good leader and how to describe leaders. I'd like you to write maybe 2 or 3 bullet points on how you can best describe a leader. Okay, let's move on. So there are many optional ways of thinking about leadership. And this comes from Jackson and Parry in 2011. And they said that it can either be leadership as a person. So that means being and knowing. So we need to think about who are leaders and what makes them leaders. So leadership as results. So that means being, knowing, and doing through their actions. What do leaders affect as far as outcomes? And then there's leadership as position, being and doing. Where leaders operate that makes them leaders. Does one have to have a formal leadership role? And then there's leadership as process, and that is only doing. So how do leaders go about getting things done that makes them effective leaders? So you might want to take a quick note of this article here. Okay. So I've just jotted a couple of things down here. Managerial work in times of change is increasingly leadership. So the lines are getting slightly blurred between management and leadership. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to quickly read through, and then we'll move on. So understanding leadership through effectiveness through model thinking. So there's just a couple of ideas here. So leadership involves traits and characteristics, even demographics, and those lead to certain behaviors and a certain leadership style. And all that contributes to the outcomes of leadership. Can you think of any other models that you might put together? I've put 2 on here to give you some ideas. So this is from Judge and Long. Oh, it's really annoying, this bar. I'm going to try and get rid of it. No, I can't get rid of it. Okay, so Judge and Long, this was a 2012 model. So you can see on the left is all the leader traits. And then on the right, we have the leader emergence and the leader effectiveness. So just want you to take a minute to quickly read through there. So again, you might want to take a note of that article. I think for me on this page, the most interesting part is the leader traits. Things like narcissism, dominance, intelligence, but also emotional stability. I think that's really interesting. Okay, we'll move on to the second model. So this is to do with leading in creativity. So this is differentiating between individual creativity and team creativity. And I've written the reference down the bottom if you want to take a note of that. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. So now I want you to be doing this activity on your own. So your view on leadership. What leader actions, behaviors are most important? So we've already been thinking about that at the beginning of the lecture. So you should already have some ideas forming in your head. What are the leader characteristics that help drive success? Is it a process? If so, what are the actions for effective leadership? So thinking about the previous 2 slides, what are the chronology of actions for effective leadership? I'm not going to give you 15 minutes. I'm going to give you 10 minutes for that. Okay, so let's move on. So I've just made a list here for you to note down because we've got quite a lot to get through, so we need to keep moving. So styles of leadership, these are all people that have talked about styles of leadership. If you want to take a note of that now, might be a good idea. So people have talked about authentic, that's Avolio et al. Inclusive leadership, that's been written about by lots of different people. Carry on through the list. Adaptive, Ron Heffeitz. Charismatic, R. House. All the different types of leadership, and I'm going to be discussing them a little bit later on. But you might want to take a note just now. I'll give you another minute to do that. Okay. So just another quote here. Strategic leadership is defined as a person's ability to anticipate, envision, maintain flexibility, think strategically, and work with others to initiate changes that will create a viable future for the organization. And I just thought that quote was good because it captures everything that leadership ought to be doing. So again, take a note of the author here, the reference, if you want to look that up. So these might be some activities or tasks that are required of strategic leaders to develop and communicate a vision, build dynamic core competencies, emphasize and effectively use human capital or talent management, invest in the development of new technologies, engage in valuable strategies, build and maintain an effective organizational culture, develop and implement balanced organizational controls, engage in ethical practices, and beyond. So this brings us on to task 2, which is 650 words. So again, back to your scenario. So in the context of the organization that you've chosen, you need to appreciate, comment, and evaluate the usefulness of different leadership theories, models, and principles. You need to discriminate between the leadership skills needed for different tasks in your organization and at different levels. So I'm just going to take you through each of the leadership theories. It's not very exciting, I apologize, but we've got quite a lot to get through. Also the models. So it just goes through step by step. So there's some major theories, different principles and explanations of leadership. So most theories view leadership as grounded in one or more of the following 3 perspectives. Leadership as a process or relationship, leadership as a combination of traits or personality characteristics, or leadership as certain behaviors, or as they are more commonly referred to, leadership skills, and we'll be touching on that later. In virtually all of the more dominant theories, there exist the notions that, at least to some degree, leadership is a process that involves influence with a group of people towards the realization of goals. So we have touched on most of that already today. So I want you to be thinking about the theories as I go through them and which one you might prefer and what's the reason for that preference. So leadership as a process, leadership as a combination of traits or personality characteristics, or leadership as certain behaviors. So that's the three perspectives. So the first is behavioral theory. This theory focuses especially on what highly effective leaders do. This theory is often preferred by educators because behaviors can rather easily be seen and duplicated. The major criticisms are that it doesn't help leaders know when to use certain behaviors and to share their motives for using those behaviors. Okay, so moving on to the next theory, we have situational theory. And this theory suggests that different situations require different styles of leadership. That is, to be effective in leadership requires the ability to adapt or adjust one's style to the circumstances of the situation. The primary factors that determine how to adapt are an assessment of the competence and commitment of a leader's followers. The assessment of these factors determines if a leader should use a more directive or supportive style. Okay, moving on to the next theory. So this is contingency theory. And this theory states that a leader's effectiveness is contingent on how well the leader's style matches a specific setting or situation. So how's that different from situational theory? Well, in situational theory, the focus is on adapting to the situation, whereas contingency states that effective leadership depends on the degree of fit between a leader's qualities and style, and that of a specific situation or context. So contingency theory would be dependent on HR and recruitment process. Okay, moving on. So the next theory is the functional theory. This theory focuses especially on the behaviors needed to help a group to improve its effectiveness and achieve its goals. The theory identifies the specific functions needed by leadership for addressing certain situations. So this theory focuses on not what's innate in a person, but what can be learned. Okay, so next theory, it's called the great man theory. And this theory focuses on the traits and actions of those who are considered to be great leaders, as if they were born with those traits of leadership. That leadership is a trait of those people more than any skills that they have learned. So for example, the female leaders that I showed you on that slide, so it would be looking them up, thinking about their traits, their personality traits and their traits of leadership, and trying to emulate them. Okay, moving on. So the next one is the path goal theory. And this theory is about how leaders motivate followers to accomplish identified objectives. It postulates that effective leaders have the ability to improve the motivation of followers by clarifying the paths and also removing obstacles to high performance and desired objectives. So the underlying beliefs of path goal theory are that people will be more focused and motivated if they believe they are capable of high performance, and they believe their effort will result in desired outcomes and believe their work is worthwhile. Okay, so moving on. So the next theory is the servant leadership theory. And this conceptualization of leadership reflects a philosophy that leaders should be servants first. It suggests that leaders must place the needs of followers or customers and the community ahead of their own interests in order to be effective. The idea of servant leadership has a significant amount of popularity within leadership circles, but it is difficult to describe it as a theory in as much as a set of beliefs and values that leaders are encouraged to embrace. Okay, so the skills theory. And this theory states that learned knowledge and acquired skills or abilities are significant factors in the practice of effective leadership. Skills theory by no means disavows the connection between inherited traits and the capacity to be an effective leader. It simply argues that learned skills, A developed style and acquired knowledge are the real keys to leadership performance. It is, of course, the belief that skills theory is true, that warrants all the effort and resources devoted to leadership training and development. Probably one of the most important theories you're going to need to know about. So moving on to the trait theory. This theory postulates that people are either born or not born with the qualities that predispose them to success in leadership roles. That is, that certain inherited qualities such as personality and cognitive ability are what underlie effective leadership. There have been hundreds of studies to determine the most important leadership traits. And while there's always going to be some disagreement, intelligence, sociability, and drive are consistently cited as key qualities. So the transactional theory. This is a theory that focuses on the exchanges that take place between leaders and followers. It's based in the notion that a leader's job is to create structures that make it abundantly clear what is expected of his or her followers, and also the consequences for meeting or not meeting these expectations. This theory is often likened to the concept and practice of management and continues to be an extremely common component of many leadership models and organizational structures. Okay, and then transformational theory. This theory states that leadership is the process by which a person engages with others and is able to create a connection that results in increased motivation and morality in both followers and leaders. It's often likened to the theory of charismatic leadership that espouses that leaders with certain qualities such as confidence, extroversion, and clearly stated values are best able to motivate followers. The key in transformational leadership is for the leader to be attentive to the needs and motives of followers in an attempt to help them reach their maximum potential. In addition, transformational leadership typically describes how leaders can initiate, develop, and implement important changes in an organization. This theory is often discussed in contrast with transactional leadership. So I've just jotted down a few things here to go with some of the theories. So maybe you want to have a little look, might give you some ideas about what to write in your assignment when thinking about the particular theories. Okay, so moving on then. So thinking about different frameworks and elements of leadership. So I'm going to introduce all the leadership models to you now. So these models usually have a suggested framework and or set of elements to implement that model of leadership. However, some of the following models have also been mentioned as theories or styles. As with the different theories, an acquaintance with the different models can further your understanding of leadership. So like with the theories, as we're reading through the different models, I'd like you to be thinking about which one you favor and why. So the first one is adaptive leadership. An adaptive leader needs to be able to connect organizational change to the core values, capabilities, and dreams of the relevant stakeholders. The adaptive leader seeks to foster a culture that collects and honors diversity of opinion and uses this collective knowledge for the good of the organization. The adaptive leader knows that change and learning can be painful for people and is able to anticipate and counteract any reluctant behavior related to the pain. The adaptive leader understands that large-scale change is an incremental process and that he or she needs to be persistent and willing to withstand pressure to take shortcuts. And I think if you're relating this to your scenario from your place of work, most of you or all of you will have experience of this. There's always one person who doesn't want things to change, and they always push back against it. So an adaptive leader would know exactly how to respond to this. Okay, so moving on. So we move on to appreciative leadership. And appreciative leadership asserts that we all never fully arrive. Instead, we all do the best we can a day at a time, using the best tools and resources that are available to us. Appreciative leadership shares generative stories and practical tools that can help each of us to feel that we belong and are valued, and to walk that path a little more consistently and consciously. In so doing, it may help others to do the same and make the world a kinder, better place. Okay, so moving on to authentic leadership now. So authentic leadership asserts the need for leaders to be truly authentic human beings in their roles as leaders. Authenticity has a variety of interpretations in this approach, ranging from being respectfully honest and direct with others in the moment to be fully self-realized human beings. Critics assert that we must be careful about how we interpret authenticity, so that we do not romanticize and idealize the concept to the extent that no human being could ever achieve that status. And thus the approach inadvertently becomes inauthentic in itself. Okay, moving on. Dynamic leadership now. Dynamical leaders pay attention to 3 conditions to ensure an effective, highly functioning organization. And these are coherence, resilience, and fitness. Coherence can be thought of as an interdependence of parts. Dynamic leaders are constantly scanning their environment for potential surprises and regard blips and trends as pieces of a larger puzzle to be solved. Resilience is the ability to integrate, recalibrate, and recover quickly when challenged. Okay, heroic leadership. Heroic leadership is when followers are greatly influenced by a leader in whom they have strong confidence to solve complex problems and achieve great goals. In that sense, the leader is their hero. Critics caution us to not take this to extremes. That is, that the hero is not to be seen as someone who can save us from any situation. Rather, the heroic leader is someone that we greatly respect, and thus we are willing to follow him or her. Okay, so systems and complexity leadership. This approach to leadership is from the belief that today is so interconnected and interdependent that leaders need to differentiate situations that are complex from those that are complicated. And I've just put an example at the bottom there. Okay, and finally, the VUCA leadership. So the VUCA framework focuses on the competencies needed to lead and act effectively in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. The framework is based on the premises that the world is changing rapidly as never before, and thus any static form of leadership soon becomes obsolete. So this is your assessment criteria for part 2. So for 2.1, you need to appreciate and comment on the different leadership theories, models, and principles. So that would be going through all the theories and models that we've just spoken about. And then for part 2.2, you need to discriminate between the leadership skills needed for different tasks in organizations and at different levels from strategic to team leader. And then we see the word evaluate for 2.3, and we need to evaluate the usefulness of leadership theories, models, and principles. So when we see evaluate, we think the positives and the negatives. So I've just got another task for you to do quickly when you start. So task number 3 is 900 words. So that's the largest part of your assignment. And this part focuses on whether your organization's objectives influence the choice of leadership style. And 3.2, for other industries or sectors, evaluate what leadership styles may be most suited to them. And there's that word again, evaluate for 3.3. So you need to evaluate for different functions of your organization and situations, which leadership styles may be most suited to them. And then for 3.4, it's identify methods of leadership development suitable for a range of different contexts. So I'm just going to take you through some of the leadership styles now. So different ways of leading. Different styles of leadership can range from very directive and influential to very supportive and consensus-based. The style that you use depends on a variety of factors. So like with the theories and the models of leadership, also for the styles, I'd like you to, as we're going through, think about which one you favor and why. Okay, so I've just got a short video to show you on the types of leadership styles before we get started.
Poor leaders make today worse for everyone by using coercive power. Transactional leaders make today better by rewarding good performance. Poor leaders make today worse for everyone by using coercive power.
Oh, okay, that should work now. Okay, I'll start the video again.
Poor leaders make today worse for everyone by using coercive power. Transactional leaders make today better by rewarding good performance. In contrast, transformational leaders are focused on making tomorrow better. They do this in 4 ways. Firstly, vision. Transformational leaders create a noble workplace that inspires others. Secondly, authenticity. Transformational leaders are authentic, not just entertaining. Their integrity inspires the team to take action. Thirdly, a growth mindset. Transformational leaders cultivate their team's growth and personal development. They invest time and energy at no depth before entering their They recognize both the campaign's effort as well as their performance. And finally, creativity. Transformational leaders encourage teams to develop ideas, work with flair, and embrace originality. They allow measured risks, which helps to foster a culture of innovation. In short, teams with transformational leaders are constantly being transformed for the better. To review, transformational leaders work towards a noble vision, act with authenticity and honesty, adopt a growth mindset, and promote creativity and new ideas. Download this HD
Okay, so that brings us on to our styles of leadership, and the first being charismatic leadership. So charismatic leaders influence others by the nature of their personality, for example, by being highly visionary, inspirational, and motivational. As with other styles of leadership, the charismatic leader can influence others for highly moral or immoral reasons. Okay, so the second style of leadership is the autocratic leadership. Autocratic leaders rarely solicit information from those they lead. Rather, these leaders make decisions based on their own perspectives, assumptions, and conclusions. This style is the opposite of the participatory leaders. Okay, so that brings us on to the next one, which is participative leadership, also known as democratic leadership. And this is when the leader encourages others to take part in decision-making and problem-solving. It can range from decisions being made by the leader after suitable discussion to decisions being made by consensus of the participants. This approach often results in stronger understanding and commitment to the outcomes of the participation. Okay, so the next one is laissez-faire leadership. This style can be seen as a hands-off style in which the leaders delegate responsibilities and decisions to the followers. The leaders do not see themselves becoming involved unless there is a problem that requires it. So laissez-faire generally means very hands-off, letting things happen as they happen. Okay, so there are different domains of each leadership, and they each need different skills. So there are at least 5 different domains or primary areas of focus of leadership, and each of them require different skills in leadership. So for example, leading yourself requires skills, for example, in self-confidence, assertiveness, and stress management. Leading other individuals requires skills, for example, in delegating, mentoring, and coaching. Leading groups requires skills in team building, facilitation, and team performance management. Other skills required are strategic planning, organizational change, and organizational performance management. Leading communities also requires skills, for example, in community organizing and collaboration. So to conclude, the skills in leading can increase in complexity as the primary focus of leadership expands. Also, the types of the skills that can overlap, and they can be highly integrated with each other as the primary focus expands. Unfortunately, we too often focus primarily on that second domain and then make strong assertions about what are always the most important leadership skills, forgetting that it really depends on the primary focus of the leadership. So the assessment criteria then for part 3. 3.1, identify and discuss how an organization's objectives can influence the choice of leadership style. And 3.2, evaluate different industries and sectors and what leadership styles may be most suited to them. 3.3, evaluate different organization functions and situations and which leadership styles may be most suited to them. And 3.4 again, identify methods of leadership development suitable for a range of different contexts. So 3.1 and 3.4 are quite straightforward. You just need to identify what it asks you to point out. And then with 3.2 and 3.3, it's evaluate again. So you need to be linking the different industries and sectors with different leadership styles and say why they are most suited. For 3.3, you need to talk about different organization functions and different situations, and then link them to the leadership styles that are most suited. So just a quick note here about referencing. A professional approach is expected from all learners. You need to be using an appropriate referencing system, and Harvard style is recommended by Qualify throughout your work. Try to make sure that you're expressing your ideas clearly and succinctly as well. Appendices. So you may include appendices to support your work. However, they must only contain additional supporting information and they must be clearly referenced in your assignment. And then the other bits, it's just about Harvard style referencing again. Word count, so it's got to be within a margin of plus 10%, so it can't be below 10%. And that brings us to the end of tonight's lecture. I hope that was helpful for you. I believe that you have your own time to do this assignment. You don't have a deadline, so please don't panic about that. Okay, so I'll be here for a few minutes if you want to ask any questions. I should also have said that if you wish to leave now, you're free to leave. The lecture has finished. Thank you. Good night.